Part 1, The Fall. I remember the fall in snapshots. The dark street, slick with rain. My hands slipping on the fire escape railing. The cold, sharp bite of the metal as I hit the ground. There was no pain. Only the sound of my breath leaving me in a rush. Like I was an old balloon punctured in one clean, sharp motion. I looked up at the cloudy night sky, the streetlights casting long shadows across the alley. My death was an accident, a misstep. One moment I was alive, running late, trying to cut through the back streets, and the next I was lying there, crumpled like a broken doll. I didn't expect to die that night, but whoever does. I thought that would be it. You die, and there's darkness, a peaceful end, or so they say. But for me, death didn't bring silence or oblivion. Instead, I found myself standing at the foot of my own body, staring down at my lifeless form, disconnected, like I was watching a stranger. I reached out to touch my chest, to feel the heartbeat that should have been there, and my hand passed right through me. I was a ghost. The weight of it hit me then, like an anchor around my neck. Panic clawed at my throat. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I could feel something pulling at me, dragging me toward that body, demanding I merge with it again. But I didn't want to, couldn't. I backed away, stumbling into the shadows of the alley, watching as my own corpse lay forgotten in the rain. People would find me eventually, but what then? What happens to me now? I wandered for what felt like hours, maybe days. Time didn't seem to exist for me anymore. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't touch anything. It was like being suspended in a limbo, always watching but never being part of the world I once belonged to. And then came the worst part, the realization that life went on without me. I stood outside my old apartment building, staring up at the window where the light was still on, knowing I could never go inside again. I couldn't reach out, couldn't hold the people I loved, couldn't warn them about what was coming. Because something was coming. I felt it, creeping beneath the surface of this shadowy new world I was trapped in. The night I died wasn't an accident, and death wasn't the end. Not for me. Part 1 introduces the moment of the accident and the haunting awareness that the protagonist's death was not the peaceful release he expected. Suspense is built through his growing realization that there's more to his death than meets the eye. The next parts will explore the chilling discoveries he makes about his fate as a spirit and the dark forces at play in his former life. Part 2, The Visitors. The first visitor came just after dusk. I was lingering near the front door of my old apartment, caught in that restless loop of trying to open it and failing each time. My fingers slipped through the doorknob like smoke, like everything else I tried to touch. The frustration gnawed at me, deeper than the shock of being dead. I couldn't feel anything but this gnawing emptiness, this need to go inside, to make sense of what had happened to me. Then I felt it, a chill, like the air had turned solid and pressed against me, pushing me away from the door. I turned, expecting to see someone. One of my neighbors, maybe, or a passerby. But the street was empty. No one should have been there. But something was. The figure stood at the far end of the alley, cloaked in shadows. Even in my ghostly form, I could feel the weight of its presence, heavy and suffocating. It was tall, unnaturally so, its head almost brushing against the building's overhang. I couldn't make out its face, just the sense of eyes, watching me, piercing through the darkness. It started to move, slowly at first, then faster, its form shifting, flickering in and out like static on a broken TV screen. I backed away instinctively, retreating toward the front door, but my body, or whatever I was now, felt sluggish, like I was moving through water or worse, like I was being drawn toward the thing despite myself. Then, a voice, low, guttural, and inside my head. "You don't belong here." I froze. The thing stopped a few feet away from me, its shape growing more defined. I still couldn't see a face, but I could sense a mouth, wide and grinning, sharp teeth gleaming in the dim light. My chest constricted, though I had no lungs to breathe with anymore. I stammered, not sure what I was even trying to say. "I live here." The thing let out a sound, something between a laugh and a growl. "Not anymore." Before I could react, it surged forward, its arm, or what passed for an arm, lunging toward me. I stumbled back, expecting the cold shock of contact, but it passed through me, like wind passing through an empty shell. A strange sensation followed, like my entire being had been shaken from the inside. And then it was gone. Just like that. The alley was silent again, the air still. I stood there, paralyzed, trying to piece together what had just happened. Had it been real, or was I losing my grip on whatever sliver of reality I had left? I didn't know what that thing was or why it had come, but I knew one thing now, a truth I had refused to accept since the moment I had died. I didn't belong here. That night, I wandered the streets, avoiding people or rather the living. I still couldn't bring myself to stray too far from the apartment, though I had no idea why. There was nothing there for me, just an empty home I could no longer enter. But something kept me close, like a string tied to my old life, pulling me back each time I tried to leave. It wasn't until much later, just before dawn, that I realized it wasn't me tied to the place. It was them, the visitors. Part 3: Whispers in the Dark. I didn't hear the whispers at first. They crept in slowly, like a faint breeze stirring through dead leaves, growing louder only when I stopped moving. At first, I thought it was my imagination, some remnant of my human mind trying to cling to what was left of my sanity. But the more I listened, the more I realized the voices were real, and they were speaking about me. He's still here. Doesn't know yet. He will. They came from all around me, echoing off the buildings, the streetlights, the very air itself. I spun in circles, searching for the source, but there was nothing. No people, no figures like the one from before. Just the cold, empty street and the endless shadows that seemed to stretch on forever. "What do you want?" I shouted, though my voice barely echoed in the night. "Who are you?" Silence followed for a moment, thick and oppressive. Then, one voice, clearer than the rest, whispered from behind me. "You were chosen. Chosen." The word rang in my head like a bell, vibrating through me with a force that made my vision blur. I turned, desperate to see who was speaking, but the street was empty as ever. And then, just as quickly as they had come, the whispers faded, leaving me alone once again. But I wasn't alone. I could feel them now, watching me from the edges of my awareness. Dark figures, shifting through the corners of my vision, always just out of sight. I would catch glimpses of them. Slender shapes, tall and distorted, their faces hidden. But when I turned to look, they were gone. My fear grew with each passing hour, and I began to wonder if I was being hunted, or simply observed, like an experiment. And then came the dreams, if you could call them dreams. In Part 2, the protagonist encounters a shadowy figure that hints at his disconnection from the world of the living. The suspense escalates as mysterious visitors and whispers reveal that his death was not random. He was chosen. These eerie encounters lead to unsettling realizations, building toward even darker revelations about his purpose as a spirit. Stay tuned for the next parts. Part 3: Whispers in the Dark. The whispers didn't stop after that night. They followed me, haunting my every step, growing louder and more persistent. They spoke of things I couldn't understand, strange phrases and cryptic words that made my head spin. I wandered the streets, always searching for something, anything that could explain what was happening to me. Days blended into nights, but time had no meaning anymore. I couldn't tell how long I had been wandering, lost in this strange purgatory between life and death. People passed by me, their faces blurred and distant, as if they existed on a different plane entirely. I could no longer feel the cold of the air or the warmth of the sun. I was nothing more than a shadow, drifting through a world that had forgotten me. The whispers grew louder at night. Sometimes they were just faint murmurs, like the wind through the trees, but other times they were sharp and insistent, digging into my mind like claws. I could never tell where they were coming from. It was as if they were inside me, gnawing at my soul, pulling me apart from the inside. They're waiting. He doesn't know. Soon. I tried to shut them out, but there was no escape. They were everywhere, always watching, always waiting. And with every passing day, I felt myself slipping further away from who I had been. The memories of my old life were fading, replaced by a growing sense of dread that I couldn't shake. I started avoiding my old apartment building, not out of choice, but out of instinct. Something about that place felt wrong. It was as if the very air around it had changed, thick with an unseen presence that made my skin crawl. The whispers were louder there, almost deafening, and the strange figures I had seen in the shadows became more frequent. I couldn't bring myself to go back, even though something inside me screamed that I needed to. One night, as I stood on the corner of the street near my apartment, I noticed something strange. The lights in my old window were on. That shouldn't have been possible. No one had lived there since I died, and the place had been locked up tight. But there it was, a soft, flickering glow spilling out onto the street, as if someone or something was inside. My heart, or whatever was left of it, lurched in my chest. I didn't want to go back, but I had to know. I had to see for myself. As I approached the building, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. The figures in the shadows seemed to close in around me, their distorted forms flickering in and out of existence. I could feel them, pressing against me, trying to push me back, to keep me away from the apartment. But I forced myself forward, step by agonizing step, until I reached the front door. It swung open on its own. Part 4, The Watcher. I hesitated at the threshold, staring into the dim hallway beyond. The air inside was thick and heavy, like stepping into a cave. The lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Something was wrong, deeply, horribly wrong. But I couldn't stop now. Something was calling me, pulling me deeper into the building, and despite the growing sense of dread clawing at my insides, I stepped through the door. The whispers intensified as I made my way up the stairs, echoing off the walls, swirling around me like a storm. My hands brushed against the banister, but there was no sensation, no texture, no coldness. I wasn't really there. Not in the way I used to be. When I reached the landing outside my old apartment, I froze. The door was ajar, the soft flicker of candlelight spilling out into the hall. My heart, or what was left of it, hammered in my chest. I had no idea what I would find inside, but something told me this was what I had been avoiding all along. I pushed the door open. The apartment was exactly as I had left it, except for one glaring difference: the figure sitting in the armchair in the corner. It wasn't human. I couldn't make out its face or form, but I could feel its eyes on me, sharp and burning like embers. It didn't move, didn't speak, but I knew it had been waiting for me. I tried to speak, but no words came out. My throat was dry, my body frozen in place. The figure shifted slightly, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw something familiar in its shape, its posture. And then, a voice. Not a whisper this time, but a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the air. "You don't remember, do you?" My mind reeled. Remember? What was it talking about? The figure rose slowly from the chair, its movements unnatural, like watching a puppet being pulled on strings. It stepped toward me, and I could see now that it wasn't just a shadow. It was me. A twisted, distorted version of myself, as if something had hollowed out my body and worn it like a mask. "I've been watching you," it said, its voice echoing in my skull. "Since the day you died." The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. This thing, this twisted version of myself, had been following me, haunting me, watching as my life unraveled. But why? What did it want? "What are you?" I finally managed to choke out. The thing's grin widened, a grotesque mimicry of a smile. "I'm what you were always meant to be." Part 3 delves deeper into the haunting experiences of the protagonist, who is being followed by shadowy figures and cryptic whispers that hint at a larger, darker truth. The encounter with the twisted version of himself marks a turning point, revealing that there is something much more sinister at play. The tension builds as the protagonist is forced to confront the terrifying reality of what he has become. Part 4, The Watcher. The twisted version of me stood in front of the armchair, its body flickering like a dying light, its features blurry and indistinct, except for that grotesque grin. I felt the air thicken between us, like a wall of pressure pushing down on me, making it hard to breathe, if I even breathed anymore. The thing seemed to revel in my confusion, my horror. "You don't remember, do you?" it repeated, stepping closer. The sound of its voice scraping through my mind like rusty nails. It wasn't just speaking to me, it was in my head, inside me. I stepped back instinctively, but there was nowhere to go. The door had slammed shut the moment I crossed the threshold, sealing me in with this monstrosity. What are you?" I stammered, my voice barely audible, trembling. I couldn't look away from it, couldn't tear my eyes from that shifting, distorted reflection of myself. "Why are you doing this?" It tilted its head, mimicking a gesture I recognized from countless moments in my past. I had done that before, exactly that whenever I was confused or amused. But seeing it now on this thing made my skin crawl. "I am you," it said, its voice thick with malice. "The real you, the one that was always meant to take over." Take over. The words barely escaped my lips. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what it was saying. "I'm dead." You think this started with your death?" Cut me off, its voice cold and sharp. No. This began long before. You were always meant to die to become this. You've been marked since the day you were born. Your purpose was never to live." Its words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I staggered back, my mind reeling. Marked? Since birth? Couldn't believe it. My life had been ordinary, hadn't it? Just another faceless cog in the machine, a guy working a dead-end job, scraping by. Nothing about me was special. But that grin, it widened, as if it could read my thoughts, feeding on my confusion. "Why?" I demanded, my voice rising with desperation. "Why me? Why was I chosen?" It leaned closer, its face hovering inches from mine. I could smell something now, a faint, acrid stench of decay, like rotting flesh. I wanted to retch, but I couldn't move. My feet were glued to the floor, my body frozen under the weight of its gaze. "You were born into it," it whispered, its voice low and venomous. "A family curse, a pact made long before you even existed. Your ancestors bargained with something ancient. They offered your soul as payment. And now the time has come to collect." Couldn't breathe. The room spun around me, the walls closing in. Pact? A curse? My mind refused to accept it, but deep down I knew. I knew something was horribly, irrevocably wrong with me. I had always felt different, like a shadow hung over my life, following me, waiting. And now I understood why. Part 5, The Gathering. I didn't run. Couldn't. I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the twisted version of myself as the truth sank in, like a weight pulling me into an abyss. My life, my death, none of it had ever been mine. It had all been leading to this moment, this revelation. My family, my bloodline, had sold me out long before I ever took my first breath. I had been doomed from the start. "I don't believe you," I muttered, more to myself than to the things standing before me. But even as I said it, I knew it was true. There had always been something wrong with my family, something we never spoke about. Whispers at family gatherings, strange rituals that I had always dismissed as superstition. My mother. She had always been distant, her eyes hollow, as if she was haunted by something she could never escape. And now I knew. She had known this would happen. She had known, and she had done nothing to stop it. The thing that wore my face seemed to grow taller, more imposing, as if feeding on my despair. "Oh, you'll believe," it said, its voice dripping with satisfaction. "You'll see soon enough." I opened my mouth to speak, to protest, but before I could utter a word, the air around me shifted. The apartment grew darker, the shadows lengthening, twisting into shapes that moved on their own. I heard a sound then, a low guttural hum, like the beating of 1,000 wings. And then they came. Figures, tall and gaunt, began to emerge from the shadows. Their forms were barely human, elongated limbs, faces twisted into grotesque masks of bone and skin. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace, surrounding me, their eyes, if they had eyes, burning with a cold, ancient hunger. My heart raced, but my body wouldn't respond. I was trapped, caught between these nightmarish creatures and the thing that wore my face. "They've been waiting for you," it said, its voice soft now, almost gentle. "Your time has come. You are one of us now." The figures closed in, their cold, skeletal hands reaching for me, pulling at my arms, my legs, dragging me down. I fought against them, struggling to break free, but it was no use. Their grip was like iron, unyielding, and the more I fought, the more I felt myself slipping into the darkness, into whatever they were pulling me toward. "No!" I screamed, my voice echoing through the empty apartment. But it didn't matter. Nothing I did mattered anymore. The twisted version of me watched with that same sick grin, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You were always meant to be one of us," it said, as the figures dragged me deeper into the shadows. "There is no escape. This is your purpose." The cold crept up my spine, wrapping itself around me like a shroud. The figures were pulling me into the floor, into the darkness that seemed to stretch on forever. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I saw faces. Familiar faces, from my childhood, from my family, watching me from the shadows. And then everything went black. Part 6. The Descent. I don't know how long I was lost in that darkness. Time had no meaning there, no shape or form. It was just endless, suffocating cold, pressing down on me, pulling me further away from the world I had once known. When I finally opened my eyes, I was somewhere else. A place that wasn't quite real, but wasn't a dream either. It was a wasteland, a desolate, crumbling city, bathed in perpetual twilight. The sky was a sickly shade of gray, and the buildings around me were hollow shells, their windows broken, their walls crumbling into dust. I stood there, alone, in the middle of this nightmare world, and for the first time I understood what had happened. I hadn't just died. I had been claimed. Part 7. The Truth Beneath the Surface, coming soon. In Part 4, the protagonist learns the horrifying truth about his death. It was no accident, but the result of a family curse, a pact made generations ago. As dark entities surround him and drag him into the abyss, he begins to realize that his entire existence has been orchestrated for this moment. The suspense intensifies as the protagonist is pulled into a twisted, otherworldly realm, where he must confront the full scope of his cursed fate. Part 5. The Descent. The cold of the wasteland clung to me like a second skin, a numbing frost that gnawed at my bones. I stumbled through the crumbling streets, my breath fogging in front of me, though I wasn't sure if I even needed to breathe anymore. The sky overhead was a flat, gray void, stretching endlessly above, without a sun, without stars. There was no life here, just an empty, decayed cityscape that seemed to go on forever. I don't know how long I wandered. Time moved strangely in this place, twisting and folding in on itself. Minutes could have been hours or even days, for all I knew. But no matter how far I walked, the city never changed. The same ruined buildings, the same crumbling streets. It was like being trapped in a maze with no way out. And then I heard them, the whispers again. They were faint at first, just a low murmur on the wind, but they grew louder as I moved deeper into the heart of the city. These weren't the same voices that had haunted me before. No, these were different, older, more sinister. They didn't speak words. Exactly. More like sounds, guttural and ancient, twisting through the air like smoke. I tried to shut them out, but they wormed their way into my mind, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I could feel them inside me, slithering through my skull, filling my head with images I didn't understand. Flashes of faces, places, things I couldn't comprehend. And then, suddenly, I wasn't alone. I didn't notice him at first. He was just a figure in the distance, standing among the ruins, his back turned to me. I froze, my pulse quickening. I hadn't seen another soul since I'd been dragged into this place, and the thought of someone or something else being here sent a jolt of fear through me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. He stood there, motionless, as if he hadn't noticed me at all. But then, slowly, he turned. His face was hidden beneath a hood, his features cast in shadow. But I could feel his eyes on me, sharp and cold, burning with an intensity that made my stomach churn. He was tall, impossibly tall, his form stretching unnaturally, like a figure pulled from a nightmare. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice a low rasp that seemed to echo in the empty streets. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Where is this? The man, or whatever he was, didn't answer right away. He took a slow, deliberate step toward me, his movements fluid and predatory, like a lion stalking its prey. "This is where you were always meant to be," he said, his voice sending a shiver down my spine. "The place between worlds. The place where the forgotten come to rot." My heart hammered in my chest, the realization sinking in like lead. "I'm dead." He let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Dead? No, not dead. Not quite. You're something else now. Something in between." I took a step back, my mind racing. "I don't understand. Why am I here? What do you want from me?" His eyes gleamed from beneath the hood, and I felt the weight of his gaze like a physical force pressing down on me. "What do I want?" he repeated, his voice a low growl. "No, it's not about what I want. It's about what they want." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. A cold dread settled over me, and I suddenly realized this man wasn't alone. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision, figures slipping through the ruins, circling us like vultures waiting for a kill. "They've been waiting for you," the man said, stepping closer. "They've been waiting for this moment for a long time." I backed away, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The figures in the shadows were growing clearer now, their forms taking shape. They weren't human. Their bodies were twisted, elongated, their faces hidden behind masks of bone and flesh. And they were watching me. Who are they?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The man's grin widened beneath the hood. "They are the collectors, the ones who feed on the lost souls. And you, my friend, you've been marked for them since the day you were born." Part 6. The mark. Marked. The word echoed in my mind, heavy with meaning I couldn't yet grasp. I felt it now, something deep inside me, pulsing like a cancerous growth, something that had always been there but that I had never noticed. It throbbed with an otherworldly heat, spreading through my veins like poison. I clutched at my chest, trying to will it away, but the more I fought it, the stronger it became. The man in the hood watched me, his expression unreadable, as if this was all some cruel joke to him. "What is this?" I gasped, my knees buckling under the weight of the pain. "The mark of your family's debt," he said, his voice low and mocking. "You were born with it, passed down from generation to generation. A price for the sins of your ancestors." I collapsed to the ground, the agony rippling through my body like fire. My skin burned, my bones ached, and I felt as though something was clawing its way out of me, tearing me apart from the inside. "They made a bargain," the man continued, his voice cold and distant. "A pact, long ago. A soul for power, a soul for wealth. And now that debt is being collected." I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore through the empty streets. I could feel them now, the collectors drawing closer, their eyes fixed on me, their hunger palpable. The shadows stretched toward me, their forms flickering like flames, and I knew I had no escape. But even in the midst of the pain, a single burning question clawed at the edge of my mind. "Why me?" I choked out. "Why me?" The man crouched down beside me, his face inches from mine. His eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, bore into me, and I felt a cold dread settle over my heart. "Because," he whispered, his voice like a hiss of wind through a graveyard, "you are the final payment, the one who seals the pact." I stared at him, my mind reeling. The final payment. It was me. My whole life, everything I had ever been, was nothing more than a transaction, a pawn in some ancient deal. My family had sold me, sacrificed me, and I had never known. "You were never meant to live," the man said, standing again. You were always meant to die. Part 7, The Debt. The collectors were closing in now, their skeletal hands reaching out for me. I could feel their cold touch, their presence like a void that threatened to consume me. My vision blurred, the edges of the world darkening as I sank deeper into the pain, into the horror of what I had become. But then, just as their hands closed around me, something changed. A flicker of light, faint but unmistakable, shimmered in the distance. It cut through the darkness, weak but persistent, and I felt its warmth, its pull, like a lifeline. The collectors hesitated, their forms flickering, and I saw their eyes shift toward the light. It was calling me. I didn't know what it was or why it had appeared, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let them take me. Not yet. Not without a fight. With every ounce of strength I had left, I reached for the light. Part 8. The final payment, coming soon. Part 5 deepens the protagonist's descent into the twisted underworld, where he learns of the family curse that has marked him as the final payment in an ancient pact. The introduction of the mysterious collectors and the agonizing realization of his fate pushes the story toward a moment of resistance, as a faint glimmer of hope emerges in the form of a distant light. The tension mounts as the protagonist faces the horrifying truth of his existence, leading to an inevitable confrontation with the forces that seek to claim his soul. Part 6, The Debt. The world around me seemed to vibrate, the air thick with the tension of the unseen forces that circled closer. The collectors hovered just outside the edges of my vision, their shadowy forms quivering in anticipation. They were waiting for me to give in, to submit to the curse that had bound me to them. My body, racked with pain, screamed for release, for surrender. But that flicker of light, distant yet tangible, tugged at something deep inside me. I wasn't ready to be consumed. Not yet. I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking beneath me, the weight of the mark burning against my chest. The hooded man, who had been watching me with a mocking curiosity, took a step back. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling amusement as he tilted his head, studying me like a predator watching its prey fight against the inevitable. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge of disbelief. "You can't fight them. You're theirs. You always have been." But I wasn't listening anymore. The light was pulling me, a soft, ethereal glow in the distance, and I could feel its warmth cutting through the cold grip of the collectors. It was faint, but it was real, and in that moment it was the only thing that mattered. I stumbled forward, my breath ragged, my mind a blur of fear and determination. The collectors hissed as I moved, their skeletal hands reaching out to grasp me, but I pushed through them, their cold touch grazing my skin but failing to hold me. The hooded man laughed, a low, cruel sound that echoed off the crumbling buildings. "You think you can escape this? You think a little light will save you?" I didn't answer, couldn't. My focus was locked on that distant glow, the last thread of hope in this nightmare. I had no idea what it was or where it would lead, but I knew I had to reach it. The ground beneath my feet shifted, cracking open like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. The collectors surged forward, their whispers growing louder, more frantic. They sensed my resistance, and it angered them. Their eyes glowed with a ravenous hunger, their twisted forms looming closer as they reached for me, their fingers curling like claws. But the light, oh God, the light was closer now. I could feel it warming my skin, washing over me like a wave of energy. The pain that had gripped me since the moment I arrived in this forsaken place began to ebb, and for the first time since my death, I felt something like life coursing through me. It was as if the light itself was pushing back against the darkness, against the collectors, holding them at bay. They hissed in fury, retreating, their forms flickering like dying flames. The hooded man, however, stood his ground. His eyes narrowed as he watched me, his amusement fading into something darker, something more dangerous. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice sharp with warning. "This isn't over. You can't outrun your fate. No one escapes the debt." I ignored him, stumbling toward the light. The ground beneath me trembled. The city itself seemed to groan and shift, as if the very fabric of this place was unraveling. I could feel the weight of the curse pulling at me, trying to drag me back, but I pushed forward, my feet carrying me closer to the light. And then, just as I thought I would reach it, everything shifted. Part 7, The Void. The light vanished. I stopped, my heart plummeting as the warmth disappeared, leaving me in the cold, empty wasteland once again. The collectors surged forward, emboldened by the absence of the light, their skeletal hands reaching for me with renewed hunger. Panic clawed at my chest, and I stumbled back, my mind racing, desperate to understand what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Was it just another trick of this place? A cruel mirage designed to give me false hope? The hooded man laughed again, his voice cold and triumphant. I warned you. There is no escape. You belong to them. Always have. Always will. The collectors closed in, their whispers filling the air, their twisted forms surrounding me, pressing against me from all sides. I could feel their cold breath on my skin, the weight of their presence suffocating me. For a moment, I felt myself slipping into that same abyss I had been fighting against, the one that had been waiting for me since the day I died. I could see the faces of the collectors now, their hollow eyes, their grinning mouths filled with jagged teeth. They were ready to take me, to claim what had been promised to them. But then I heard it. A voice, soft and familiar, cutting through the noise, the whispers. Fight, damn it. The voice was faint, almost drowned out by the cacophony of the collectors. But it was there, unmistakable. I froze, my heart pounding. I knew that voice. It belonged to someone I hadn't thought about in years. Someone from my past. But how? How could they be here? The collectors hissed, their grip tightening around me, pulling me down, but I forced myself to listen, to focus on the voice. Don't give in. Fight. It was a woman's voice, my mother's. Part 8, The Revelation. The shock of hearing her voice, my mother's voice, was enough to break through the fog of fear and despair that had clouded my mind. She had been gone for years, taken by an illness that had ravaged her body and left me alone. But here she was, speaking to me from the void, urging me to fight. I didn't understand how it was possible, but I didn't care. Her words gave me strength, a flicker of hope in the darkness that the collectors couldn't snuff out. I pushed against their hold, my arms trembling, my legs weak, but I fought with everything I had left. The collectors screeched, their hands clawing at me, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. My mother's voice guided me, her words like a beacon in the night. You have to break the chain, she said, her voice soft but insistent. You have to sever the bond. I didn't know what she meant, but something inside me, something deep and primal, did. The mark on my chest burned hotter now, pulsing with an intensity that threatened to consume me. It was the source of the curse, the root of everything that had brought me here. And I had to destroy it. With a guttural scream, I clawed at my chest, my fingers digging into the skin, tearing through the layers of my own flesh. The pain was unbearable, like fire coursing through my veins, but I didn't stop. I ripped at the mark, pulling it free from my body, blood pouring from the wound. The collectors screeched, their forms flickering wildly, their hands retreating from me as the mark pulsed in my hand. It was small, no bigger than a coin, but it held an unfathomable power, a darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of it. Not of them. With a final scream, I hurled the mark to the ground, smashing it against the cold stone. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, the dark energy within it exploding outward, washing over me like a wave. And then there was silence. Part 9. The Collapse, coming soon. Part 6 marks a turning point in the protagonist's journey, as he begins to resist the forces that have bound him to this cursed fate. His desperate fight against the collectors leads to the revelation of a family secret, and the intervention of a familiar voice from his past, urging him to break free. In a moment of pure defiance, the protagonist takes matters into his own hands, tearing out the mark that has cursed him since birth. The story reaches a climactic point as the curse begins to unravel, setting the stage for the next chilling confrontation. Part 7: The Collapse. For a moment, the silence was absolute. The world around me seemed to hold its breath, suspended in the aftermath of the mark's destruction. I stood there, blood dripping from my chest, the shattered pieces of the curse scattered at my feet. The air felt different, lighter, freer, as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But the relief was fleeting. The ground beneath me began to tremble, small cracks spiderwebbing through the pavement. The buildings around me groaned, their hollow frames shuddering as the very fabric of this place seemed to unravel. The gray sky above swirled and darkened, as if something massive and unseen was stirring just beyond the horizon. The collectors had vanished, their forms dissolving into the shadows as soon as I had destroyed the mark. But I wasn't alone. I could still feel the presence of something far more ancient and far more dangerous than the collectors, lurking just beyond the edge of my awareness. I staggered back, my chest heaving, my body weak from the strain of what I had just done. The voice of my mother, once so clear, had faded, leaving only a faint echo in the back of my mind. But her final words clung to me, their meaning slowly sinking in. I had severed the bond. I had broken the chain. But what did that mean? As the tremors grew stronger, I realized with dawning horror that this place, the desolate, decaying wasteland where I had been trapped, wasn't just falling apart. It was collapsing, being swallowed by the void. The ground split open in jagged lines, yawning chasms that swallowed entire streets and buildings, leaving nothing behind but darkness. I had destroyed the curse, yes, but in doing so, I had undone the very thing holding this place together. I had unleashed something far worse. I turned to run, but the ground gave way beneath me, the street crumbling into a vast, bottomless pit. I stumbled, barely catching myself as the pavement disintegrated beneath my feet. All around me, the city was collapsing, dissolving into the void. And then, from the heart of the destruction, I heard it. A voice, deep, resonant, and terrifyingly familiar. "You've broken the seal." I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice was everywhere, filling the air, vibrating through the ground, shaking the very foundations of this place. It was the voice of something far older, far darker than anything I had encountered. It was the voice of the entity that had bound my family in the first place, the thing my ancestors had bargained with. "You thought you could escape?" The voice continued, its tone cold and amused. "You thought you could sever the bond without consequence?" The air around me seemed to thicken, pressing down on me like a suffocating weight. I gasped, struggling to breathe, as the voice grew louder, more menacing. "The mark was a chain," it hissed. "A lock, and you have broken it. Now the door is open." I turned, desperate to find some way out, some way to escape, but the world around me was crumbling faster now. The city was gone, swallowed by the void, and the darkness was closing in on all sides. There was nowhere left to run. And then I saw it, a figure, towering and immense, emerging from the heart of the void. It was not like the collectors, not like the twisted version of myself. No, this was something far worse. Its form was vast, almost too large to comprehend, its body shifting and writhing as though it was made of smoke and shadow. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed like molten embers, burning with a malevolent hunger. It was the entity, the one that had claimed my family's souls for generations, the one I had been marked for, and it was coming for me. Part 8: The Reckoning. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. The air around me had thickened to the point where it felt like I was drowning, every breath a struggle. The figure loomed closer, its form blotting out what little remained of the crumbling cityscape, its presence filling the sky like a storm. "You were never meant to escape," the entity said, its voice echoing through the void. "You were the final piece, the last payment, and now you are mine." I couldn't speak, couldn't scream. My body felt frozen, paralyzed by the sheer force of its presence. I had thought destroying the mark would free me, but all I had done was unleash the very thing I had been trying to escape. The entity reached for me, its hand or what passed for a hand, stretching out, fingers long and twisted like the roots of a dying tree. I could feel the cold radiating from it, a chill that seeped into my bones, threatening to rip me apart from the inside. And then, just as its hand was about to close around me, I heard the voice again. Not my mother's voice this time, but a different voice, one that had been silent for far too long. Fight! It was faint, almost a whisper, but it cut through the darkness, through the weight of the entity's presence. And with that single word, I felt something stir inside me. A spark, a flicker of defiance that refused to be extinguished. The voice came again, louder this time. Fight! And I did. With a surge of strength I didn't know I had, I broke free from the invisible grip that had been holding me in place. My body screamed in protest, every muscle burning. But I didn't care. I wasn't going to let this thing take me. Not without a fight. The entity roared, its voice shaking the very air around me. But I didn't stop. I reached down, grabbing one of the shattered pieces of the mark that still lay at my feet. It pulsed in my hand, the dark energy within it burning my skin. But I held on. I won't let you take me, I shouted, my voice raw and hoarse. I won't let you win. The entity's eyes flared, and it lashed out, its massive hand sweeping toward me like a tidal wave. But I didn't run. I didn't cower. I threw the shard of the mark straight into its chest. Part 9, The Fall. The moment the shard struck, the entity recoiled, a deafening scream ripping through the void. The ground beneath me shook violently, and I was thrown back, landing hard on the crumbling pavement. The air around us crackled with dark energy, the very fabric of the world ripping apart as the entity writhed in agony. For a moment I thought it was over, that I had won. But then the entity straightened, its burning eyes locking onto mine with a fury I had never known. You think you can destroy me? It growled, its voice a low, guttural snarl. I am eternal. I am. Before it could finish, the ground beneath us gave way, collapsing into a bottomless void. I felt the air rush past me as I fell, the world spinning around me, the entity's voice fading into the distance. And then, everything went black. Part 10. The Awakening, coming soon. Part 7 delivers a powerful shift in the story, as the protagonist's attempt to break free from the curse unleashes the full wrath of the ancient entity that had bound his family for generations. The world around him collapses, the full horror of the entity's power revealed. But even as the protagonist faces the terrifying reality of his fate, a spark of defiance ignites within him, leading to a climactic confrontation with the being that seeks to claim his soul. The tension rises to its peak, setting the stage for a final showdown. Part 8. The Awakening. I awoke in darkness. It was a different kind of blackness than before. No longer the crushing void of that crumbling wasteland, but something deeper, quieter. The kind of dark that presses against your skin, makes you feel weightless, like you're floating in a sea of ink. I couldn't tell if I was lying down or standing up. There was no up or down anymore, just endless, silent dark. But I was alive, or at least I wasn't dead. Not entirely. I reached out, feeling nothing but the empty space around me, trying to orient myself. My heart pounded in my chest, too fast, too erratic, like it wasn't used to beating anymore. I felt detached, hollow, like something had been ripped from me, leaving a raw, gaping wound in its place. I remembered the fall, the ground crumbling beneath me, the void swallowing me whole, and the entity, its massive hand reaching for me as I plummeted into the abyss. I had thrown the shard of the mark at it, but I wasn't sure if it had worked. Had I heard it? Had I escaped? My thoughts were sluggish, like I was wading through thick mud. Something wasn't right. My body felt heavy, my limbs numb, and I had to force myself to move, dragging myself through the darkness, even though I wasn't sure where I was going. I wasn't sure if there was anywhere to go. I don't know how long I wandered through that black void. Time had no meaning here, just like before. But eventually, I began to feel something, an odd sensation, like a pull in my chest. It was faint, barely noticeable at first, but it grew stronger the longer I walked, tugging at me like an invisible thread, drawing me in a specific direction. I followed it, not because I trusted it, but because I had no other choice. There was nothing else. No light, no landmarks, no sense of direction. Just that pull, that subtle, persistent force leading me forward. And then, slowly, I began to see it. A faint glow, distant but growing brighter with each step. It was warm, soft, like the first rays of dawn breaking over a horizon. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the sudden shift in light after so long in the dark, and for the first time, I saw where I was. It wasn't a wasteland anymore. I was standing on the edge of a vast expanse, a desert of pale sand stretching out in every direction. The sky above was gray, flat and unchanging, but the sand beneath my feet shimmered faintly in the dull light, as if it held a secret of its own. But what truly caught my attention was the figure standing at the center of the desert. Part 9, The Return. The figure stood motionless, their back to me, bathed in the soft glow that emanated from the sand beneath them. They were tall, slender, their outline blurred by the strange light. Something about them was familiar, a presence that stirred memories I had buried long ago. My heart raced, the pull in my chest growing stronger, urging me forward. I hesitated. The last time I had encountered a figure in a place like this, it had been the twisted version of myself, a shadow that had mocked and haunted me. But this felt different. The air around this figure wasn't cold, wasn't suffocating like before. It was peaceful. I took a cautious step forward, the sand crunching softly beneath my feet. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence, but I could feel their attention on me, a quiet, patient awareness that made my skin prickle. And then, as I drew closer, they turned. My breath caught in my throat. It was me, but not the twisted, grotesque version I had seen before. This was a reflection of the person I had been before I died. My face, my features, but softer somehow. There was no malice in their eyes, only a deep, profound sadness. "You've come far," the figure said, their voice low, calm. It echoed slightly, as if carried on a distant wind. "But you're not finished yet." I stared at them, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice hoarse, as if I hadn't spoken in years. The figure smiled, a faint, sorrowful expression. "I'm what remains of you," they said. "The part you left behind. The part you've been running from." I shook my head, confusion swirling in my mind. "I don't understand. I thought I broke the curse. I destroyed the mark." The figure nodded. "You did. But that was only the beginning. You severed the bond, yes, but you didn't destroy it. The entity," they paused, their eyes darkening. "It still holds power over you, over all of us." My heart sank. The thought of facing that thing again, of being dragged back into its clutches, was more than I could bear. I had fought so hard to escape, to break free. Was it all for nothing? "What do I have to do?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The figure stepped closer, their eyes locked onto mine. "You have to reclaim what it took from you. You have to face it. The final confrontation." I backed away, shaking my head. "I can't. I barely escaped last time. I don't have anything left." "You do." Their voice was soft but firm, cutting through my fear. "You have more than you know. You have the strength to face it. But first, you need to remember." "Remember what?" The figure reached out, their hand hovering just above my chest, where the mark had once burned. "Everything." Part 10, The Memories. The moment their hand touched me, a flood of memories surged through me. I saw my childhood, the fragments of my life that I had forgotten or buried. Memories of my mother, the way she had always seemed distant, her eyes clouded with an unspoken fear. I saw the rituals, the strange gatherings my family had held in secret, the whispers I had ignored. I saw the faces of my ancestors, stretching back through the centuries, their lives bound by the same curse that had claimed mine. And then I saw it, the pact. It was made long ago, in a time when my family had been desperate. They had bargained with the entity, trading a soul for power, for wealth, for survival. But they had never realized the true cost. Each generation had paid the price, the curse passing down from parent to child, the mark branding each new heir. I was the last, the final payment. But I wasn't like the others. I had broken the chain. I had severed the bond. Now I had to destroy it. The memories faded, and I was back in the desert, the figure watching me with a quiet, knowing gaze. "Do you understand now?" they asked. I nodded, my chest tight with the weight of the truth. "I have to stop it, once and for all." The figure smiled, a sad, bittersweet smile. "Yes, but you won't be alone." I looked around, confused. "What do you mean?" The figure stepped closer, their form beginning to blur and fade. "I'm with you. I always have been." And then they were gone. Part 11. The final confrontation, coming soon. Part 8 marks a major turning point in the story, as the protagonist is confronted with the full truth of his family's curse and the pact that has bound him for generations. Through an encounter with a peaceful, familiar figure, an echo of himself, he unlocks the memories of his past and realizes the true nature of the curse. With this new understanding, the protagonist prepares for the final confrontation with the entity that has haunted his bloodline for centuries. The tension builds as the stage is set for the climactic battle that will determine his fate once and for all. Part 9. The final confrontation. The desert stretched endlessly around me, a vast and empty expanse, but I wasn't alone anymore. The figure, the part of me I had left behind, had faded, but their presence lingered, a warmth that steadied me in the face of the coming storm. I could feel it, the weight of the final battle pressing down on me like a heavy cloud, dark and looming, waiting for me to take the first step. And I knew where I had to go. The entity was waiting for me. It had always been waiting. And this time I wouldn't run. I wouldn't hide. I wouldn't be its final payment. I would be its undoing. As I began to walk, the pale sand beneath my feet shifted, darkening with every step. The horizon, once a flat, gray blur, started to ripple, like a curtain being drawn back to reveal something far more sinister. The sky above twisted, turning a deep shade of black, and the ground trembled beneath me, as though the world itself was preparing for what was to come. The pull in my chest, stronger now, guided me forward, and soon I saw it. The twisted, monstrous figure of the entity rising from the desert like a storm on the horizon. It was larger than before, its body writhing and shifting like smoke, its eyes burning with a molten fire that scorched the very air around it. This was it, the thing that had plagued my family for generations, the creature that had claimed countless lives, stolen countless souls, and I was going to end it. As I approached, the entity turned, its massive form coiling in on itself, its eyes locking onto me with a gaze that felt like fire on my skin. I could feel the malevolent power radiating from it, a dark, ancient force that pressed against my mind, trying to push me back, to bend me to its will. But I wasn't the same as I had been before. I had severed the bond. I had broken the chain. I wasn't its pawn anymore. "You return," the entity said, its voice like thunder, echoing across the desert. "Foolish." I stopped a few feet away, standing tall despite the trembling in my legs. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, my voice steady, even though fear gnawed at the edges of my resolve. The entity's laughter rumbled through the ground, a sound so dark and vast that it felt like the earth itself was shaking in terror. "You should be," it hissed, its body shifting, growing taller, more monstrous. "You were marked for me, born to be mine, and now you will fulfill your purpose." I clenched my fists, the memory of the mark still burning in my chest, but I didn't back down. "No," I said firmly. "I broke the mark. I broke the curse. You have no power over me." The entity's eyes flared, glowing brighter, and I felt its rage ripple through the air. "You think you can defy me? You think you can escape what has been written for you since the beginning?" I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't waver. "I'm not like the others. I'm not your final payment. I'm not your slave." The entity roared, the sound deafening, and the ground beneath us cracked, splitting open like the maw of some great beast. The sky above twisted and darkened, as if the world itself was reacting to the entity's fury. "You are nothing," the entity thundered. "A speck, a grain of dust in the wind. I am eternal. I am." "Nothing," I interrupted, my voice cutting through the storm like a blade. "You're nothing." The entity surged toward me, its massive hand, clawed and twisted, reaching out to grab me, to crush me, to claim me once and for all. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Instead, I raised my hand, and in that moment, I felt the power of my ancestors, the weight of all the souls this creature had taken. It had fed on us for centuries, grown fat on the lives it had stolen. But now I was ready to take it back. As its hand closed around me, I unleashed everything I had. The energy, the light that had been buried deep within me, exploded outward, washing over the entity in a blinding wave. The air crackled with power, and I felt the entity recoil, its form flickering, unstable. It screamed, a sound so high and shrill that it pierced my skull. But I didn't stop. I pushed harder, channeling all the pain, all the suffering, all the strength of those who had come before me. The light burned brighter, consuming the entity, tearing it apart piece by piece. "You will never take another soul," I shouted, my voice filled with a strength I didn't know I had. "You will never hurt anyone again." The entity writhed, its body twisting, shrinking, its once mighty form crumbling under the weight of the power I had unleashed. Its eyes, those burning, hateful eyes, dimmed, flickering like dying embers. And then, with one final, deafening scream, it was gone. The desert fell silent. Part 10, The Aftermath. I collapsed to the ground, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me like a wave. My body ached, my mind reeled, but the darkness was gone. The entity, the creature that had haunted my family for generations, was gone. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was free. The desert around me began to change, the pale sand shimmering as the light returned, growing brighter, warmer. The gray sky above faded into a soft, golden hue, and the air was no longer heavy with dread. It was light. It was peaceful. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth wash over me, and for the first time since my death, I felt whole. The bond had been severed. The curse had been broken. The mark was gone, and with it, the weight that had burdened my soul. But I wasn't alone. I could feel them. My ancestors, their presence all around me, watching over me. They had been waiting for this moment, waiting for someone to break the cycle, to end the curse. And now they were free too. "You did it." The voice startled me, and I opened my eyes to see the figure standing before me. The same figure from the desert, the part of me I had left behind. They smiled, a soft, serene smile, and I could see the light in their eyes, the same light that had guided me here. "I'm free," I whispered, my voice trembling with relief. The figure nodded. "You are." I stood, my legs still shaky, but the heaviness in my chest was gone. "What happens now?" The figure stepped closer, their form glowing softly in the warm light. "That's up to you. You've broken the chain. You've ended the curse. You're no longer bound." I looked around at the shimmering desert, the soft glow of the horizon. "Is this death?" The figure's smile widened, but there was no sadness in it. "No, this is peace." Part 11. The Crossing, coming soon. Part 9 brings the protagonist to the climactic final confrontation with the ancient entity that has haunted his family for generations. The tension reaches its peak as the protagonist unleashes his newfound strength, channeling the power of his ancestors to destroy the entity and break the curse once and for all. With the entity vanquished, the story shifts into a moment of peace, as the protagonist reflects on his victory and the freedom he has gained. The stage is set for the final chapter, where the protagonist will face the ultimate decision. What comes next in the afterlife? Part 10, The Crossing. For the first time since my death, I stood in the desert not as a prisoner, but as something new. The air was lighter, my chest no longer heavy with the weight of the curse that had bound me for generations. The dark presence that had loomed over me for so long was gone, reduced to nothing by the power I had unlocked, by the light that had torn through the void. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. The figure, the part of myself I had once lost, still stood beside me, watching, waiting. Their face, my face, was calm, serene, as if they already knew what came next. I could feel the desert shifting beneath us, the pale sand swirling and glowing faintly in the golden light, as though the very world itself was transforming into something new. But there was still one question hanging in the air, one that I couldn't push away. What happens now? I asked again, my voice low, uncertain. The figure stepped forward, their glowing presence casting a soft light around us. Now you choose. The words hung in the air between us, heavier than they should have been. I frowned, my mind racing. Choose? Choose what? The figure turned, looking out over the shimmering desert, their expression thoughtful. You've broken the chain. The curse is gone. You're no longer bound to the past, no longer marked by the sins of your ancestors. They paused, their gaze shifting back to me. But you still have a choice to make. You can stay here in this place, in this peace, or you can cross over. Cross over. The words sent a shiver down my spine, though I didn't quite know why. I had never thought about what came after death. Not really. I had been too consumed by fear, by the curse, by the endless torment of the entity that had hunted me. Now that the fear was gone, the thought of what lay beyond felt strange, foreign, even a little terrifying. What do you mean? I asked slowly, trying to grasp the weight of what they were telling me. The figure smiled, soft and gentle. You've earned your freedom. The choice is yours now. You can stay here in this place, or you can move on into the afterlife, into whatever lies beyond. I felt my heart skip a beat. The afterlife. I had fought so hard, survived so much, just to escape the curse. Now I had a new decision to make. I glanced around at the desert, the soft glow of the horizon, the peaceful warmth that surrounded me. It was calm here, safe. There was no more pain, no more fear. But the thought of staying, of simply remaining in this place, frozen in time, didn't sit right with me. Is this it, then? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Is this where it all ends? The figure shook their head, their expression sympathetic. No, this is just the beginning. But only you can decide what that beginning looks like. I stood there for a long time, the weight of the choice pressing down on me like a physical force. I had been trapped in a nightmare for so long, and now, for the first time, I was free. But what did freedom even mean? Was it staying in this peaceful desert, never moving forward, never facing anything again? Or was it crossing over, whatever that meant, and stepping into the unknown? The fear I thought I had escaped crept back in, curling around my chest like a cold hand. I had no idea what lay beyond this place. What if it was worse? What if the peace I felt here was all there was? But then I thought of my family, of the generations that had come before me, their lives stolen by the curse, their souls trapped by the pact. They had never had a choice. They had never had the chance to escape, to move on. I had broken the chain. I had ended the curse. But was that enough? The figure watched me, their eyes kind but knowing. You're not bound by fear anymore, they said quietly. You've faced it. You've overcome it. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. What if I'm not ready? The figure smiled, a soft, understanding smile. You'll never be ready, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take the step. I took a deep breath, letting their words sink in. Maybe they were right. Maybe there was no such thing as being ready. Maybe that was the point. I had spent my entire life and death running, hiding, avoiding the truth. Now that the truth was laid bare, maybe it was time to face it. Maybe it was time to move on. I turned to the figure, my decision made. How do I cross over? I asked, my voice steady now, the fear melting away. They nodded, their eyes warm and approving. Follow the light. I looked past them, out toward the horizon where the soft glow had grown brighter, more defined. It wasn't just the desert anymore. It was something more, something beyond. The light shimmered like a distant gate, beckoning me forward, calling me home. The figure stepped aside, motioning toward the light. "This is your journey now. I'll walk with you as far as I can, but the rest is yours." I hesitated for a moment, glancing back. At the desert, at the soft sands that had once seemed so endless, so vast. But now they felt small, temporary. I turned back to the light, my heart pounding in my chest, and took the first step. Part 11: The Path Beyond. The light grew brighter with every step I took, its warmth wrapping around me like a blanket, soothing the last remnants of fear and doubt that clung to my soul. I could feel the presence of the figure beside me, their silent support a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone. Not yet. The ground beneath my feet shifted as I walked, the sand becoming firmer, the air lighter. The horizon was no longer distant. It was right there, just a few steps away, and beyond it, I didn't know. I couldn't see what lay beyond the light, but I could feel it. A sense of peace, of finality, of something far greater than anything I had ever known. The figure stopped beside me, their form glowing faintly in the soft light. "This is where I leave you," they said, their voice calm, but tinged with something bittersweet. I turned to them, my heart heavy with gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." They smiled, their eyes soft and kind. "You found your way, just as you were meant to." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I wanted to say more, to express the overwhelming sense of relief, of freedom, that I felt. But there were no words. Instead, I turned back to the light, feeling its pull, knowing that this was the moment. This was the crossing. With one last breath, I stepped forward, into the light. The world around me dissolved into pure warmth, pure peace. I felt weightless, free, as though every burden I had ever carried had melted away. The fear, the pain, the doubt. It was all gone, washed away by the light. And in its place, there was only joy, only freedom. I was no longer bound. I had crossed over. Part 12. The Final Horizon, coming soon. Part 10 brings the protagonist to the threshold of the afterlife, where he is faced with a choice: to remain in the peaceful desert or to cross over into the unknown. After a powerful moment of reflection, he chooses to move forward, guided by the presence of the figure that has walked beside him throughout his journey. The tension of the story shifts from fear to acceptance as the protagonist prepares for the final step of his journey, the crossing into the afterlife, and the freedom that awaits him beyond. Part 11: The Final Horizon. Stepping into the light was like sinking into a warm embrace, a feeling so complete that it overwhelmed all the noise, the fear, and the confusion that had once consumed me. As I moved through it, everything around me blurred: time, space, the world itself, all melting away into pure, glowing warmth. The sensation of freedom, true freedom, was almost indescribable. It felt like I had been released from every weight I had ever carried, every shadow that had followed me, all at once. I could no longer see the desert behind me. There was no more figure, no more haunting whispers, no more dark entity. There was only the soft glow, carrying me forward. For the first time, I realized there was no fear left inside me. Whatever lay ahead, whatever I was about to encounter on the other side of this crossing, I wasn't afraid of it anymore. It wasn't the unknown that terrified me. It was the thought of staying still, of remaining bound in a cycle that had already taken too much. But now that cycle was broken. As I moved deeper into the light, I felt the weight of something familiar tugging at me. Not a dark presence, not the entity, but something warm, something that made me feel connected. It was like I was tethered to the essence of all those who had come before me, the ancestors who had been trapped by the same curse. And now they were free too. I felt them, their joy, their peace, swirling through the light, welcoming me into this new existence. It wasn't just my victory, it was theirs too. The bonds that had held us, the chains that had kept our souls tethered to darkness, were shattered. We were all free. I didn't need to see them to know they were there. I could feel them, their presence surrounding me like a soft breeze, guiding me forward, and I understood. The fight hadn't been just about breaking the curse. It had been about freeing every soul that had been bound to it. And I had done it. We had done it. The light shifted ahead of me, a faint shimmer in the distance growing stronger, more vibrant. I kept moving, each step feeling lighter, easier, as though the very air itself was lifting me up, carrying me forward. I didn't know where I was going, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was that I was no longer bound. I was moving toward something greater, something beyond the pain and struggle of the life and death I had endured. And then I saw it. The light parted, revealing a vast, endless horizon stretched out before me. It wasn't like the desert, not anymore. It was something different, something more alive. The sky was bathed in soft hues of gold and lavender, streaked with the warm glow of a sun that wasn't quite a sun. The ground beneath me felt solid, but it shimmered with the same soft light, like a place made of both dream and reality. I took a deep breath, inhaling the peace, the calm that seemed to radiate from every inch of this new world. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, but it felt like home, like this was where I had always meant to be, and I had finally reached it. Part 12, The Reunion. As I stood on the edge of that horizon, a soft breeze stirred the air around me, carrying with it a familiar scent, a scent I hadn't smelled in years. It was faint, almost elusive, but it brought with it a flood of memories, memories that made my heart ache with longing. And then I saw them. Figures began to emerge from the horizon, walking toward me, their forms glowing softly in the golden light. At first, they were just shapes, outlines in the distance, but as they drew closer, I recognized them. Faces from my past. Faces I had lost long ago. My mother, my father. They were the first to approach, their eyes bright, their expressions filled with warmth and love. I hadn't seen them since their deaths, years before mine, but they looked just as I remembered, whole, peaceful, no longer burdened by the struggles that had weighed them down in life. I took a shaky step forward, my chest tightening with emotion. Mom? Dad? My voice was barely a whisper, choked with disbelief, with joy. They smiled, and in that moment, all the pain, all the sorrow that had haunted me melted away. My mother reached out, her hand warm and solid as it touched mine, pulling me into an embrace that felt like home. My father stood beside her, his hand resting on my shoulder, his gaze filled with pride and love. You did it? My mother whispered, her voice soft and full of pride. You broke the chain. I swallowed hard, tears welling in my eyes. I thought I'd never see you again. My father shook his head, smiling. We were always here, waiting for you. And now you're free. We're all free. More figures appeared behind them, faces I had never seen before but recognized in my heart. Ancestors, family members who had been taken by the curse long before I was born. They smiled at me, their expressions filled with gratitude and peace, and I knew that they, too, had been waiting for this moment. I had freed them all. The reunion was quiet, peaceful. There were no words that needed to be said, no explanations needed. We simply stood together, embraced by the light, the warmth of each other's presence. It was more than enough. As the moments passed, the horizon behind them seemed to shimmer again, a new light appearing beyond the golden expanse. It wasn't like the light I had crossed through. It was different, deeper, like a door opening to something even greater, something I couldn't yet see, but I knew was waiting. This is just the beginning, my mother said, her voice soft as she gazed out toward the new light. There's more ahead, but it's up to you when you want to take that step. I looked at her, at my father, at the faces of all those who had come before me. They were free now, just as I was, but there was still more to come. I could feel it. The crossing was just the first step. I smiled, the weight of all that had come before finally lifting from my shoulders. I'm ready, I said quietly, and with that we turned, stepping together toward the light. Part 13. The Endless Journey, coming soon. Part 11 brings the protagonist to the final horizon, where he experiences the full weight of his victory. The reunion with his family and ancestors, now freed from the curse, offers a moment of peace and joy as the protagonist prepares to move beyond the afterlife's threshold. With the curse broken and his loved ones by his side, the story reaches its emotional climax. as the protagonist steps into a new chapter of his journey, one that promises even greater peace and freedom. Part 12. The Endless Journey. The light ahead grew brighter as we walked, but it wasn't blinding or harsh. It was warm, welcoming, like stepping into a place I had always known but had somehow forgotten. The horizon stretched endlessly before us, and though I couldn't see exactly where it led, I could feel it. This wasn't the end. There was more, much more, waiting beyond the glow. My mother walked beside me, her hand still in mine, her presence like a steady anchor. My father was just behind us, his expression serene, as if he had known all along that this moment would come. The other souls, my ancestors, family members I had never met but felt deeply connected to, moved with us. Their faces were calm, their steps light, as though they too had found peace at last. As we moved deeper into the light, the world around us began to change. The golden sands underfoot transformed into something softer, almost ethereal, like walking on clouds. The air was no longer just air. It felt alive, filled with energy that flowed through me, filling every part of my being with a calm I hadn't known was possible. It was as if the very essence of this place was welcoming me, embracing me, pulling me into something greater. And yet, even as the warmth surrounded me, there was a flicker of something else, a whisper at the back of my mind. It wasn't fear, but curiosity, a gentle question that tugged at the edges of my consciousness. What's beyond this? The light ahead shimmered, shifting like a veil, and I could sense that there was another threshold, another crossing. I looked around at the others, at my mother and father, at the faces of my ancestors. They were all moving toward it, but at their own pace. There was no rush, no urgency. This place, this moment was timeless. My mother turned to me, her eyes soft, her smile tinged with a quiet understanding. "You've already come so far," she said gently. "But you're right to wonder. There's always more." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words sink in. This was peace, yes, but it wasn't an end. There were still layers to be uncovered, still steps to be taken. It wasn't over, and maybe it never would be. The thought didn't scare me. Not anymore. I glanced at my father, who was watching me with a knowing look. He had always been the quiet one, the one who didn't need to say much to make his presence felt. Now, standing in this light, I could see that he had found the same peace I had. He was free too, just as I was. "What's waiting for us?" I asked, my voice steady, curious. My father smiled, a small, content smile. "Everything, and nothing. It's whatever you need it to be." The words sank in slowly, like ripples spreading across a still pond. I didn't need to understand everything right now. I didn't need to rush. This was my journey, and it would unfold at its own pace. The shimmering threshold ahead flickered again, beckoning. I took a step closer, my heart calm, my body light, and as I did, I felt the presence of something else. Something vast, something beyond comprehension. It wasn't threatening or overwhelming. It was simply there, like a door to the unknown, a path that led further than I had ever imagined. I turned back to my mother and father, my heart swelling with gratitude. "Will you come with me?" I asked, the words almost catching in my throat. They exchanged a look, their expressions soft and full of love. My mother shook her head gently. "We've already taken our steps. This is yours now." I swallowed hard, emotions swirling in my chest, but there was no sadness in their refusal, only understanding. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm ready." Part 13. The Crossing Beyond. The moment I stepped through the threshold, everything changed. The light that had surrounded me didn't fade, but it shifted. The warmth remained, but the landscape transformed, blossoming into something new, something that was both familiar and utterly alien. I was no longer standing on sand or clouds, no longer walking through a desert or a horizon. I was standing in a field, endless, golden, swaying gently in a soft breeze. The sky above me was a deep, endless blue, but it shimmered with hues I had never seen before, colors that defied explanation. The air itself was alive, humming with energy, and every breath I took filled me with a sense of completeness I had never known. I walked forward, my steps light, the ground beneath me solid but soft, as if the world itself was cradling me. I could feel the presence of others, souls like mine, who had crossed into this place before me. But they weren't visible. Not yet. I sensed them around me, a gentle awareness, like walking through a dream. And then I realized, this was my space, my crossing, my final horizon. I wasn't walking into someone else's afterlife. I was walking into mine. The revelation came slowly, like a gentle wave washing over me. This place, the beauty, the calm, the peace, it was shaped by me. It wasn't some predetermined paradise or final resting place. It was the reflection of my soul, the place where I was meant to be, where I could finally rest, finally be at peace. But there was something more, something beyond even this. As I moved deeper into the field, I felt the ground beneath me shift again. The air shimmered, and the presence of the others, my family, the ancestors I had freed, seemed to draw closer. I could feel their joy, their freedom, radiating through the very fabric of this place. I stopped for a moment, turning my face to the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. The light here wasn't like the light I had seen before. It was richer, more vibrant, filled with life and promise. It wasn't an end. It was a beginning. I smiled, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the peace wash over me. Part 14. The Endless Horizon. The journey had been long. The fight had been hard. But now, standing on the edge of this new horizon, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't bound by anything anymore. Not by fear. Not by the past. Not even by the need to understand what came next. This was freedom. Pure, unshackled freedom. I could stay here in this place I had created, or I could keep moving forward. The choice was mine, and for the first time it felt like a choice I could make without fear, without doubt. I could rest, or I could journey further. There was no rush, no pressure. I was free to decide, and I knew deep down that whatever choice I made, it would be the right one. With one last breath, I turned toward the endless horizon, ready to take the next step, whatever that might be. Because now I was truly free. Part 15. The final step, coming soon. Part 12 completes the protagonist's journey toward ultimate freedom, where he steps beyond the afterlife's threshold and into a space shaped by his own soul. This new horizon represents not just peace, but the realization that the journey isn't over. It's only just begun. With the weight of the past lifted, the protagonist stands at the edge of something new, ready to move forward in complete freedom, no longer bound by anything. The story approaches its final resolution, where the protagonist will decide whether to continue the journey or to rest in the peace he has earned. Part 13. The final step. I stood on the edge of the golden field, the soft wind tugging gently at me as though coaxing me forward. The horizon stretched endlessly before me, shimmering with possibilities, each more tantalizing than the last. I had come so far, broken the curse, freed my ancestors, and crossed into a world beyond death, a place where fear no longer held sway over me. Yet here, at the very brink of everything, I realized that the journey was mine to shape. The endless horizon beckoned, inviting me to take the next step, to explore what lay beyond this place, beyond everything I had ever known. But there was no pressure, no urgency. It was as though time had unraveled, leaving me suspended in the moment, free to choose my path. And then, for the first time since I had crossed into this place, I realized I wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. The thought washed over me like a wave, soft and warm. The fear, the doubt, the endless gnawing questions that had once plagued me had dissolved into nothing. All that was left was peace. Not the peace of finality, but the peace of choice, the knowledge that whatever came next was mine to decide. I could stay here in this beautiful place I had created. This world, bathed in golden light, where my family's presence surrounded me, where the curse no longer lingered in the shadows. It was safe. It was peaceful. But the horizon still called to me, a soft hum in the back of my mind, a reminder that there was more, always more, if I was willing to seek it. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze wash over me, carrying with it the faint echoes of my ancestors' voices. They were free now, just as I was. There was nothing holding any of us back anymore. They had found their rest, their peace, and though their presence still lingered, I knew they had taken their own paths beyond the light. I smiled, feeling a deep warmth settle in my chest, knowing that they were exactly where they needed to be. But where did that leave me? I opened my eyes again, staring out over the horizon, the shimmering light stretching on forever. I felt a pull in my chest, not a demand, but an invitation, a gentle tug, like a whispered promise of something even greater than this place of rest. A journey still to be taken. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. It would be easy to stay here, easy to rest, to enjoy the peace I had fought so hard to earn. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I had fought, I had defied an ancient power, I had refused to let my fate be dictated by the past. I wasn't finished. With a quiet certainty, I turned to face the horizon, the soft glow of the sun warming my back. The light shimmered ahead, like a door that was always open, always inviting me to step through. My heart swelled with a mixture of anticipation and calm. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, a new chapter in a story that would unfold forever if I let it. I took a step forward, my foot pressing gently into the soft ground, the golden field shifting beneath me like clouds. The horizon seemed to grow closer, the light becoming clearer, sharper. With every step, the air felt lighter, the sense of possibility expanding around me, as though the very fabric of the universe was welcoming me into its depths. I didn't know what lay beyond the horizon, but I no longer needed to. The need for answers, for control, had faded. I was no longer defined by the chains that had once bound me. Now I was free to move forward, to explore, to exist without the weight of the past. And so I walked. As I moved toward the light, I felt a shift, subtle at first but unmistakable. The horizon itself seemed to dissolve into the air, becoming one with the sky and the ground beneath my feet. The boundaries that had once separated me from the unknown fell away, and I realized with a quiet sense of awe that the horizon wasn't something I needed to cross. It was something I had already become a part of. There was no line, no barrier between me and what lay beyond. I was the horizon, the endless light, the shimmering expanse. It was all within me, and I was within it. The world had opened up, not into something external, but into something deep inside myself, something that had always been there, waiting to be unlocked. I wasn't just walking toward the next step in my journey. I was the journey. I paused for a moment, standing in the middle of the golden field, letting the realization settle over me like a gentle rain. The path ahead wasn't something I needed to find or discover. It was something I was creating with every step, with every choice. The journey wasn't something that happened to me. It was something I shaped, something I carried within me. The horizon, the field, the sky, they were all a part of me now. And I was a part of them. There was no longer a need for a destination. No need for an endpoint. I could stay here, or I could move forward, or I could create something entirely new. The choice was mine, and it always had been. With a deep breath, I smiled, a sense of joy bubbling up inside me. The fear, the doubt, the confusion, it was all gone. I wasn't bound by anything anymore. I wasn't even bound by the need for answers. I could simply be, and that was enough. Part 14, Becoming the Light. As I stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the horizon, I felt a warmth radiating from within me. It was a warmth I hadn't known before, deeper than the light that surrounded me, more profound than the peace I had found in the golden field. It was the warmth of freedom, of possibility. I was no longer a prisoner of fate, no longer bound by the chains of my past. The curse that had haunted my family for generations was gone, dissolved into the void, and with it, the weight of every fear, every doubt, every shadow. I had crossed into something new, something limitless, and now I was ready to take the final step. With one last look at the golden field, at the soft shimmer of the horizon, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, not toward a destination, but toward an endless journey. The light around me folded into itself, becoming a part of me as I became a part of it. And in that moment I understood. There was no end. There was no beginning. There was only the journey. And it was beautiful. Part 15. The Endless Light, coming soon. Part 13 brings the protagonist to the ultimate realization that the journey is not something external, but something within. The horizon and the light become part of him, symbolizing his complete freedom from the chains of the past, the curse, and the fear that once held him captive. The story reaches its emotional resolution as the protagonist embraces the endless possibilities of existence, knowing that he is free to shape his own path. This part encapsulates the profound sense of peace and empowerment that comes with true liberation. Part 14, Becoming the Light. The moment I stepped forward, the horizon folded into me. It wasn't like stepping through a doorway or crossing a threshold. It was more like dissolving into the very essence of the light itself. The boundary between myself and the world around me blurred, and the golden field, the shimmering sky, even the soft breeze that had been whispering through the air, all of it became a part of me. I felt weightless, untethered, as though I had become pure energy, pure light. There was no longer a separation between my body and the world. I was the light. I was the horizon. And for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be free. There were no limits here, no walls, no end and no beginning. Time itself ceased to exist. I wasn't bound by the physical rules that had once governed my life, or even my death. Everything was connected, everything was alive, and I was part of that vast, endless web of existence. I closed my eyes, letting the sensation wash over me, and in that moment, I could feel the presence of every soul that had ever existed. Not just my family, not just the ancestors I had freed from the curse, but every soul that had ever passed through the veil. It was a presence so vast, so infinite, that it was impossible to fully comprehend. But it wasn't overwhelming. It was comforting. It was like being part of something far greater than myself, a collective consciousness that spanned beyond time, beyond life, beyond death. And yet, I was still me. I was still someone. Even in this boundless state, I hadn't lost my sense of self. I hadn't dissolved completely into the light. I had become the light, but I still remembered who I was, what I had fought for, what I had overcome. That realization settled into me like a soft, glowing warmth. This was my existence now, limitless, yet still personal. I wasn't lost. I had found something more profound than I had ever imagined. As I floated in that sea of light, I began to sense something else. A flicker of possibility, something new. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but as I attuned myself to the currents of energy that flowed around me, I began to see it more clearly. It was like a ripple in the fabric of the universe, a soft vibration that pulsed with life, with creation. I didn't understand it at first, but as I reached out to touch it, to become it, I realized what it was. It was the future. Not just my future, but the future of everything. I could see it now, stretching out before me like an endless tapestry, threads of possibility weaving in and out of one another, creating patterns, shaping worlds, shaping lives. I could see every choice, every moment, every decision that had ever been made, and every choice that was yet to come. And I could shape it. The thought sent a thrill through me. I hadn't just crossed into the light, I had crossed into something greater. I had crossed into the very essence of creation itself. And now I was a part of it. I could create the future not just for myself, but for others, for the universe itself. I reached out, my mind expanding, and I felt the threads of possibility respond to my touch. They vibrated, humming with life, shifting under my influence. I could feel the weight of each decision, the way it rippled through time, creating new paths, new realities. This was more than freedom. This was power. Not the kind of power that controlled or dominated, but the power to create, to shape. I could feel the flow of existence moving through me, and with it came the understanding that I wasn't alone in this. I was part of a vast, infinite dance, a dance that had been going on since the beginning of time and would continue forever. And now I was part of that dance. Part 15. The Endless Light. I don't know how long I stayed in that state, floating, existing, becoming, but it didn't matter. Time had no meaning here, not in the way it had before. The future, the past, the present, they were all one, all part of the same endless flow. I could see them all at once, and yet, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt calm, serene. But even in that boundless sea of light, there was still something pulling me forward. A new horizon, not a place, but a sense, a direction. It wasn't something I could see or touch, but I could feel it calling to me, beckoning me to move deeper, to explore further. I was ready. I had already crossed so many thresholds, broken the chains of the past, freed myself from the curse, embraced the light. Now it was time to take the final step, to move beyond even this, to explore the endless possibilities that lay ahead. I took one last look around me, at the shimmering web of existence, at the threads of possibility that flowed through me, and then I let go. I let myself sink deeper into the light, deeper into the current of creation, into the infinite. There was no fear, no hesitation, only the sense of becoming, of growing, of expanding into something even greater than I had ever imagined. And as I took that final step, I understood. There was no end. There never had been. There was only the journey. And it was beautiful. Epilogue, beyond the horizon. I don't know how to describe what came next. Words like light and infinity fall short of the reality I experienced. It was more than that, more than anything language could capture. I had become part of the universe itself, part of the endless dance of creation and possibility. Every breath, every thought, every action was woven into the fabric of existence. But I was still me. I hadn't lost myself in the infinite. I had found myself. I had become part of something far greater, but in doing so, I had found my true purpose, my true self. The journey never ended. It only changed, shifted, grew. And as I moved forward, deeper into the light, I knew that I wasn't alone. The souls I had freed, the ancestors I had fought for, the ones who had come before me, they were with me, part of the same endless flow. And together we would continue to create, to explore, to become. There was no end. There was only the journey. And it was everything I had ever hoped for. And part 14 brings the story to its powerful conclusion, where the protagonist fully merges with the light, realizing that they are now part of the endless dance of creation. The sense of freedom is deepened as they come to understand that the journey doesn't end. It simply transforms. The epilogue provides a final reflection on the protagonist's experience, highlighting the beauty of infinite possibility and the peace that comes with true liberation from all boundaries. The story reaches its thematic resolution. The realization that the journey, not the destination, is what defines existence. Epilogue. The echoes of eternity. In the quiet space that followed my final step, I felt a ripple, subtle at first, like a pebble dropped into still water. It spread out, touching every corner of the infinite light, expanding far beyond me. I was part of it, and yet, something deep within whispered that this ripple was more than just a response to my presence. It was an echo of the lives I had touched, of the souls I had freed, of the curse I had broken. It was the aftermath of my choices, my journey, a ripple that would never stop, carrying my essence forward into the vast, endless stretch of eternity. And then, through that ripple, I heard something faint, distant, but unmistakably familiar. Voices, not whispers, not the dark murmurs of the past that had once haunted me, but something else, something filled with warmth, with life. The echoes of the souls I had encountered, of the ancestors who had been freed, of those who had walked with me, even if only for a moment. They were still with me, not bound to me, not clinging to the past, but moving forward, just as I was. Part of the same endless dance, the same creation. I could feel them, my mother, my father, the countless generations that had come before me, each of them continuing their own journey, just as I continued mine. And though our paths had diverged, we were still connected, still part of the same current of existence. As I drifted through the light, the realization settled over me like a soft blanket. We had never truly been alone. Even in the darkest moments, even when the curse had weighed heavy on my shoulders, I had never been alone. There had always been a connection, invisible but unbreakable, tying me to the ones who had come before, to the ones who would come after. The ripples spread wider, faster now, and I knew it wasn't just my journey that was shaping the future. Every soul, every life, every choice, they were all part of the same ripple, each one touching the others in ways that could never be fully understood, but always felt. We were all connected, part of a vast, infinite web of existence that stretched beyond time, beyond space, beyond life and death. And I was part of that web. The light around me shifted, growing brighter, more vibrant. I could feel it pulsing, alive with energy, with creation. It wasn't just a place, it was everything. It was the space between moments, the breath between heartbeats, the silence between notes in a song. It was the very essence of existence, and I was woven into it. I felt a smile spread across my face, not because of any grand revelation or sudden understanding, but because I finally felt whole. I finally was whole. There was nothing left to fight, nothing left to fear. Only the endless journey, the endless possibility of what lay ahead. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the light wrap around me. And in that moment, I felt something shift again. The ripple had reached its peak, and now it was returning, bringing with it the echoes of every soul, every choice, every moment that had led me here. It was a chorus of voices, not in words but in feelings, in the shared experience of existence. I listened to the echo, letting it fill me, letting it remind me that this was only one moment in a journey that would never end. And as the echo faded into the infinite, I opened my eyes, ready to take the next step. The final echo. There is no true ending, only an endless series of moments, each one carrying us forward, each one an opportunity to grow, to explore, to create. I stand on the edge of one of those moments now, the light stretching out before me, filled with endless possibilities. I don't know what lies beyond, but I don't need to. I understand now that the journey isn't about knowing what comes next. It's about embracing the unknown, about moving forward even when you don't have all the answers. I step into the light, not with hesitation, but with joy, because I am free, because I am the journey, because the ripple of my existence will continue, touching others, shaping futures, long after I've taken this final step. And that is enough. An epilogue. The echoes of eternity ties up the final threads of the story, reflecting on the infinite nature of existence and the interconnectedness of all souls. The protagonist's journey has not only freed themselves, but has created ripples that will continue to shape the future, affecting others in ways unseen. The narrative closes with a powerful realization that the journey never truly ends, and that the beauty of existence lies in its limitless possibility. The story leaves readers with a sense of peace, knowing that the protagonist is not only free but part of something much larger and eternal.